I didn't show up to make problems. I showed up to fix one. The small white house sat quietly beneath two old oak trees, its fence leaning, its porch swallowed by weeds that brushed the windowsills. From the street, it looked like no one had lived there for years, but I knew Mrs. Parker still did. She was 85, once the neighborhood's gardener, now too weak to lift her own watering can. The city had posted a bright yellow notice on her door, warning her to cut the grass or pay a fine she couldn't afford. When I stopped by that morning, she smiled softly and said, "I used to love this yard. Now I just watch it disappear." I told her not to worry and unloaded my mower from the truck. The sound filled the quiet street as I cut through months of wild overgrowth, uncovering the walkway hidden beneath. But halfway through, a police cruiser rolled up. The officer stepped out, hand resting on his radio, voice calm but firm. "Sir, this property's been reported," he said. "You can't be working here without approval." I pointed to the porch where Mrs. Parker stood, one hand gripping the rail for balance. "She asked me to help," I said. "I'm not charging her anything. Just doing what should have been done long ago." The officer hesitated, then nodded. "Finish it up," he said quietly. "You're not doing harm." When I was done, the porch steps were clear again. In the air smelled of cut grass and sunlight. Mrs. Parker wiped her eyes and whispered, "I didn't think anyone still cared." I told her, "The world still cares." "Ma'am, sometimes it just needs reminding. What about you? Would you have stopped to help her, or waited for permission first?"
Cracker, why don't you feed your kids? You're just a Trump supporting
Kids look orange like Donald Trump.
I was mowing the lawn for a 60-year-old lady when a woman from across the street suddenly stormed over and started screaming that I was destroying property and spying on her neighborhood. And before I could even explain, she lifted her phone and began live streaming, telling everyone watching that I was recording her house and trespassing, which made several neighbors gather around whispering and pointing. One man even said I was the kind of person who exploited the elderly for money. And what shocked me most was that even though I was obviously sweating, cutting grass, doing something helpful, not a single person asked what I was actually doing. They all looked at one moment and immediately decided I was the villain. But I tried to stay calm because I knew the old lady was inside watching with her trembling hands pressed on the window. Yet the woman kept escalating, stepping right into my face, telling me that people like me were not allowed in this neighborhood, and that if I didn't leave immediately, she would make sure I had a record, a sentence that hit me hard, because I had a complicated past I was trying to move on from, and the last thing I wanted was someone using it as a weapon against me. And when the police arrived, the woman burst into tears, claiming I broke in, filmed her home, and damaged property, inventing anything she could to push me into trouble. And the officer looked me up and down, then at the lawnmower in my hand. And I simply said, "I'm just helping the lady inside. She can't mow her yard anymore." And hearing that, the old woman slowly stepped out, holding onto her cane, her voice trembling as she told them I was the only person in the neighborhood who checked on her, fixed her fence, brought her meals when she was sick. The woman's face instantly changed as she stuttered that she was only trying to keep the neighborhood safe. But no one believed her anymore, and the officer looked at her and asked a question that froze everyone. "Did you confirm anything before accusing him?" And I didn't say another word. I just looked at the crowd and wondered why people were so quick to believe the worst about someone they didn't know. And that day I learned that some people don't need evidence to attack you. They only need a reason. And sometimes kindness doesn't earn respect. It attracts suspicion. And as the neighbors stood there awkwardly, I just bowed to the elderly lady and went back to mowing her lawn, ignoring the embarrassed eyes behind me, because I knew the only thing that proves who you really are is not what people say, but what you do, even when no one believes in you.
You cannot just mess with this driveway. Someone is going to get hurt.
I am clearing the water so it stops flooding the sidewalk.
Who gave you permission to work here?
I did not stop because the driveway was cracked or the weeds were pushing through the concrete. I stopped because the curb was clogged. Water pooled across the sidewalk. The corner felt dangerous, in a way most people would rather ignore. The grass had grown thick around the edges, trapping mud and runoff every time it rained, turning the driveway into a slick mess that spilled into the street. I started edging slowly, clearing a narrow channel so the water could move again. When I noticed a woman watching from across the road, she did not wave or ask questions. She raised her phone. Minutes later, a patrol car rolled in and stopped hard at the curb. The officer stepped out, eyes scanning the mud, the trimmer, and the fresh cuts in the grass. The woman spoke first, saying I was damaging property, saying the water was not my responsibility, saying someone was going to get hurt because of what I was doing. I explained that the runoff was already a problem, that the weeds were blocking drainage, and that I was not charging anyone. The officer listened but stayed firm, asking who owned the driveway and who had given permission. Before I could answer, the front door of the house opened. An elderly man stepped out slowly, one hand on the frame. The other bracing his weight like every step was an argument with his body. He said the driveway flooded every storm since his wife passed, that he had slipped twice already, and that he could not afford repairs or fines. He admitted he had been scared to ask for help because every notice from the city felt like a countdown. The officer's posture changed. The woman went quiet. The yard, the curb, the pooled water suddenly made sense. I finished clearing the edges, opening a path for the water to drain, turning a hazard back into something manageable. When the puddles finally emptied, the old man stood there watching the water disappear like it was something precious. He thanked me, not for fixing concrete, but for making the day feel less heavy. It made me wonder how many dangers grow quietly until someone decides they are worth stopping for. If you saw this on your street, would you step in or keep driving? Tell me what you think, like this story, and share it so more people look twice.
You can't do this. This isn't your property.
I'm just clearing it so no one gets hurt.
Who authorized you to work here, sir?
It's like this every time it rains. I can't walk safely anymore.
All right, sir, let me understand what's going on. That's why I stayed to finish it.
I did not stop because the grass was ugly or because the yard looked neglected from the road. I stopped because the sidewalk felt dangerous, squeezed between passing cars and a strip of dry grass that had grown tall enough to hide where the concrete ended. The white fence still stood straight. The house behind it looked cared for. But the ground told a different story about someone who could no longer keep up. I started edging slowly along the sidewalk, keeping my trimmer steady as traffic rushed past close enough to feel. When I noticed a woman standing near the fence watching me without saying a word. She crossed her arms, then raised her phone. Minutes later, a patrol car pulled over and an officer stepped out. Eyes moving from the trimmer to the grass to the narrow path I had already cleared. The woman spoke first, saying I had no right to be there, saying this was not my property, saying someone was going to get hurt if I kept working. I explained I was only trying to make the sidewalk safe and that I was not charging anyone. The officer listened, but stayed firm, asking who authorized the work and whether I understood there had been complaints. Before I could answer, the front door opened. An elderly man stepped outside slowly, leaning on the fence post as if it were the only thing keeping him upright. His clothes were clean but worn, his movements careful, measured, like every step had to be planned. He said the grass dried out while he was sick, and that he could not keep up anymore. He said the sidewalk scared him more than the notices, because cars did not slow down, and his legs no longer moved fast enough to get out of the way. He admitted quietly that asking for help felt heavier than falling. The officer looked at the road, the narrow sidewalk, the man gripping the fence, and his posture changed. The woman lowered her phone. I went back to work, widening the cleared edge until the sidewalk felt open again. When I finished, the old man tested the ground with his foot and nodded like he had just won a small argument with fear. He thanked me for staying, not for the grass, but for seeing the danger before it turned into something worse. It made me wonder how many people live one bad step away from disaster while everyone else keeps driving. If this were your street, would you step in or keep walking? And do you think helping like this crosses a line or restores one? Tell me your thoughts in the comments, like this story, and share it so more people slow down and notice.
You can't just cut this. It's not your place.
I'm only clearing what's blocking the path.
Who gave you permission to work here?
I didn't call anyone. I asked them to help me.
I did not stop because the driveway looked messy or because the weeds were creeping in from the edges. I stopped because the narrow concrete path beside the house had become harder to use every week. Squeezed between thick bushes and a driveway that funneled cars in and out without warning. The small house looked lived in, the windows clean, a car parked close by. But the greenery along the side had grown wild and heavy, pressing into the space like it was slowly reclaiming it. I started trimming carefully along the edge, keeping the blade low so I would not damage the concrete or the fence line. When I noticed someone watching from farther down the drive, she stood with her arms crossed, phone already in her hand, eyes fixed on every movement. Before I could finish one clean pass, she stepped closer and asked who told me I could be there. Her voice sharp and certain I was crossing a line. I shut the trimmer off and explained I was only clearing the overgrowth to make the path usable again, not charging anyone and not touching anything beyond what was spilling over. She shook her head and said people get fined for things like this, and that it was not my job to decide what needed fixing. Minutes later, a patrol car slowed and stopped near the curb, and an officer walked over, calm but firm, asking what was going on and why there had been a call. The neighbor spoke quickly, pointing at the tools, saying I was on private property without permission. As the officer turned toward me, the side door of the house opened. An older man stepped out slowly, wiping his hands on his pants, moving with the kind of caution that comes from too many close calls with balance. He said the bushes grew faster than he could manage, and that every time he tried to clear them, his legs gave out before the job did. He admitted the path scared him now, especially when he carried trash or tried to get to his car, and that asking for help felt harder than letting it get worse. The officer listened, looked at the narrow walkway and the trimmed edge already visible, and his tone softened. I went back to work, clearing just enough space so the path felt open again instead of threatening. When I finished, the man tested the ground with a careful step and nodded, relieved. It made me think about how many people live quietly adapting to danger because asking for help feels like a failure. If this were your neighbor, would you step in or stay silent? And do you think helping like this crosses a line or restores dignity? Share your thoughts in the comments, like this story, and pass it on.